And we're live. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm thrilled today to have Kelsi Cory here from Cory Exec Recruiting. If you are on LinkedIn in a multifamily space or real estate management, property management space, you know Kelsi. The web of your network and relationships is long and far and deep and intentional, and it's incredible some of the people that you've been able to place and the postings around that. And I really love what you talk about. Those that are seeking opportunities, it's just really special how you approach the positioning of all of your candidates and the positioning of all of your opportunities. I find that something to be very unique that I've been able to kind of like absorb while we've been following one another. And so excited for the conversation today. And for everyone talking about or listening in for the first time, Get Into Hell Yes is the show is about looking to hear stories from people that are in leadership and sales leadership roles that are either in their journey to find hell yes or have found hell yes and have a repeatable motion around this, value delivery. So now what's a hell yes buyer? That's often something people ask. So in hell yes context, people have already figured out the problem they're seeking to solve. In many cases, they've tried to do it themselves or they've tried to solve it different ways. Actually, in fact, probably the most hell yes buyers have tried it their own way and realize that is a very ineffective use of their time and resources and quality. And so they seek third parties, vendors, consultants to help them solve their problems. But they're able to articulate those problems and they're out there and searching it and they're trying to solve it. And because they have that mindset around seeking to solve something, they are very quick to move down funnel in the buyer's journey because they've already articulated they know the impact of no decision. So that's exciting when we have to talk about people in the hell yes side of things. And I think that what's especially exciting about conversation today around executive recruiting and placement is that a lot of this is shadow, kind of like shadow game. And there's a lot of trust with respect to the information that's shared, how it's shared on both sides of the equation when trying to make an executive appointment lock in. So that's kind of an interesting background to kind of dig in a little bit. We'll kind of get ready in 2 seconds here. As always, Getting to Hell Yes is brought to you by IRCX. IRCX is AI remote maintenance software for property management. We solve the triage, trips, and turns problems, and all really around speed, effort, and quality. So if you need some information on that, check us out. Give me a DM. Folks listening, you're welcome to ask questions. The engagement makes it a lot of fun, and certainly these live shows are great for that. And as always, we kick it off with a bit of a background around the person the guest we're chatting with today. Kelsi, a little bit about yourself, your background. How did you end up in this role? How did you end up deciding to found Cory Exec Recruiting? And then, and what's the problem that you solve for your buyers?
Yeah, no, first of all, thank you for having me on Getting to Hell Yes. I think what you're doing and what you've been, growing and establishing across the real estate market, in all verticals of real estate honestly, I love the fact that you just jump in and do all these LinkedIn lives and you connect so many of us all together in different capacities. So kudos to you. A little background on myself. It's interesting. I actually was thinking about this today before we jumped on, whenever people always want to know, like, how did you get into the industry? And, I always say, what made you decide to stick with it? Right. Because of course you don't always end up sticking with where you ultimately go. But, just like for many of us inside the real estate sector, we don't really get taught in school, about this industry, let alone like property management, whether it is multifamily, SFR, BTR, whatever it might be for most of us. And I was no, different than that. I was 18. I was like so ready to start my life. So I was like, I'm going to go look for my first apartment. And I was so excited to just, move out, start my new adulthood. And I remember I was touring these apartments. I always loved real estate, but at that point, I only knew about buying and selling homes. Like I never had any idea that there was really any other industry verticals outside of that. So when I was touring this apartment complex, I was in the golf cart with one of the leasing agents, and it just made me kind of stop and question, how the heck did you get this job? Like,
Right.
what is this job and what is this industry? And this seems kind of cool. And so I asked her, how did you end up finding this opportunity, and what did that look like for you? And she was so kind and referred me to a local staffing agency within the Denver, Colorado market. That's where I lived at that time. And I went there, I interviewed to the local staffing firm, and I was like genuinely excited to start my potential path as a leasing agent and work myself inside the industry and see, what was all about. And I think about 2 weeks later, I get a call, and there was a different plan, and the local agency said, actually, we want to offer you a job here. We like you so much, we want to bring you on to our team. And
Interesting.
work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And at that time, like, I had no idea what recruiting was. I mean, it was just a term in an industry. Again, I still don't think many are educated inside the space. And so I was 18, and I was just so stoked to have my first big girl job that you didn't work weekends, holidays. So for me, I was like, why not? Let's try it. And it serves real estate. So for
Mhm.
me, it was like the best of both worlds. And now I'm in it a decade later. I haven't ever left. So I started a lot of my career for the first half in the staffing recruiting side, which is different than the executive search side. And that kind of leads into the next thing is, how did I found, Cory Executive Recruiting? And I would say probably about 6 years in, I was really hungry and driven. I knew entrepreneurship at a very young age. I was in high school, doing different types of scholarship things and, events to create my own business, but I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. I just knew one day I would own my own company.
Mhm.
So 6 years in, I got to a point where I'm like, do I really love this industry of staffing and serving real estate? And I kind of challenged myself. I thought there had to be something cooler out there. And I couldn't find it, so I was like,
That's
no,
funny.
I think this is my calling, is people. But I got to a point where it was very transactional.
Mhm.
Staffing can be very transactional because you have a lot of deadlines. You have a lot of different open
It's
opportunities.
naturally reactive,
Yes,
isn't it?
it
Isn't
is.
it?
It's extremely fast paced. It's, you never know what's going to happen. And part of me loved the adrenaline rush. I mean, I
Mhm.
thrived in that capacity, but it also got to a point where it was like, hey, there's not a lot of room on that side of the business, at least where the organization I was, where you could really foster meaningful relationships. And I said, there's got to be a better way that we can be doing this that actually has more impact versus filling literally seats in
Mhm.
the matter of sometimes 4 hours a day or long term. It just really depended on what the search looked like and the parameters. And so at 24, I decided I'm going to take the leap of faith. I just got married, and my husband at the time was like, "Look, I want to travel." And I was like, you know, I can't do that if I stay at this organization. So I was like, I think now is the time for me to really separate and look at, what does this look like? How am I going to build Cory?
Mhm.
And I took the leap of faith, left on great terms, moved out to New York with my new husband at that time. And I started Cory. I was working at Panera Bread half the time, all by myself. And I learned a lot. Like, when you leave working with a team, working in leadership, because I became the director and I was kind of the second in command with the
Mhm.
VP and the president, you don't realize the work that is given to you, and then you build off of that. But then
Sure.
when you leave to go build your own thing, you literally have a pen and piece of paper and just yourself, and
Yep.
like, you have to go build your work. And that was the most scary, exhilarating experience of my life. And so sitting in Panera, it was like, what the hell do I do now?
Yeah.
How am I going to build this? But I knew one thing was for sure, was executive search, direct hire, not doing on the staffing side, was really critical and important to me. And how do I really take that transactional part out of the business? And
Yeah.
really, how do I look at things from 5 to 7 years from now that are going to keep me continuing to build a legacy versus just another business that came up and then would shut down 5 years later. So that's a long story of like how I founded Cory. And here we
Well,
are.
I think there's a couple of things that are interesting from your story, just even so far, is that like you've got you obviously scrappy personality, right? Like that's
Yep.
there's tons of evidence around that. But like you get into you're in a transactional business, which is a race to the bottom, compete on
Mhm.
price, undifferentiated product, undifferentiated service, and then you transitioned yourself with like by design into a value creation,
Mhm.
compete on service
Right.
uh, business, which are two different competitive lenses. So I just want to
Mhm.
make sure the audience doesn't lose sight of that. That in one case is to basically, see a ball, hit a ball. And the other one is like you're investigating. There's a longer sales cycle.
Right.
There's different payment terms. Like you might get a percentage of dollars or a placement fee for a staffing solution engagement, but it's a totally different, and they might turn out real quick. But then you
Right.
have in executive recruiting, it's a totally different ballgame because everything is non-transparent. It's strategic. There's companies that are
Right.
betting on you. So if we could just pause for a second and talk about that first year when
Yeah.
you're building pipeline of, because and also not to forget, recruiting is a marketplace conversation
Mhm.
and you're brokering relationships. So you have to build up demand on the buyer side and you have to build up supply
Right.
on the candidate side. That is not something that happens the day you start.
Right. You're right. Yes.
So
Yes.
tell us about that first year.
That first year was it was really hard because when you have to figure out what is your differentiator, right?
Mhm.
You don't have somebody sitting next to you saying, you're going to say this, that, and the other. It makes entrepreneurship is very much you're based on your imagination, creativity, and your grit. It
Mhm.
really comes down to, you have to really, pull your bootstraps up and find that discipline to figure out what is it going to look like and how long can you go, right? That could be years, it could be 6 months, whatever
Mhm.
that's going to look like, because it is a lot of trial and error through that first year, and honestly for the first few years, until you really figure out what is your craft. And I'm
Mhm.
really big into that, is that over a period of time. And for me it was really critical that I niche down, and I'm a big believer in this. The more niche that you are and the more that you can really build a brand and a story behind that, a personality,
Mhm.
something that's just different than just throwing up a website offering the normal service that you see, and then everybody kind of gets the same flavor, and then you look up a year and a half later and you're not really making it, right?
Mhm.
It's like you have to really figure out and get uncomfortable, really uncomfortable, getting on calls, pitching your service, really building that out. What did you like? What did you not like? And start kind of like crafting your new narrative. And honestly, also separating yourself from what you've learned. And I've always been a big believer personally that I like to keep blinders up with competitors. And here's why.
Okay.
I don't believe personally, for me, if I'm too worried about what everybody else is doing, how they're serving their industry, it
Mhm.
actually compromises my ability to be even more creative than
Mhm.
what I could be serving at the bottom line. And so for me, it was really important to cut the noise out. I'm not building what's already been done. I'm trailblazing something completely new. And for that, I had to really let go of what I've learned and all the things, take some of those critical areas that were important to me, which was the relationship, the mentorship, really understanding like what are the pain points for both sides of the market, and work on that lens and say, okay, now I'm going to build something that no one probably has seen, which like Leaders on Deck is very much that way. We're doing
Mhm.
something no one else is still doing, because we're bold, like for
Mhm.
me, I'm like, it's all about taking, calculated risks and figuring out how do you continue to serve and add value to your audience on both sides of the marketplace. Even if it's never been done before, doesn't mean that it won't work. You
Right.
just have to find a way to make it work. But the first year was, I think I had a little bit of, I don't know what you would call it, but for me it's faith. But I moved to Poughkeepsie, New York,
Yep.
which is just a very small town in New York. I mean, nobody would know it. And actually, I'm not kidding. Like after I announced that I opened up Cory Executive Recruiting, and I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to fly this thing. I got my first deal in Poughkeepsie, New York, and I closed my first deal in Poughkeepsie, New York. And
Outstanding.
that was, and I've never worked in that market again, which is
Yeah.
hilarious. But I'm like, those were the moments that told me I can do this.
Mhm.
I'm supposed to be here right now. I knew it was very abnormal to get, a brand new client and close where you literally live down the street. I've never seen that before on a direct hire basis. And so
Yeah.
after that, it was just really like building and leaning into that confidence, saying, like, I know the road ahead is going to be very long and very tedious. And I'm going to have to really get uncomfortable with a lot of these conversations to start building this out and believing in myself in that process. But I think I just have so much conviction in what I'm doing, and that I really believe the more you invest in relationships, and I look 5 years ahead and not for just tomorrow, the more I'm still going to be in business 10 years from now. And that is really our secret here at Cory. Is it's just, I don't look at things of dollar signs on your forehead.
Mhm.
And that's more on third party agency side versus in-house talent acquisition. They're built out separately. They have a different way that they make income, right? But a lot of agencies, it is very much, it's unfortunate, but if they don't see dollar signs on your forehead that day, meaning they can make a placement off of you, they're not going to invest in you. So it
Yeah.
actually isn't that hard to show up differently in this industry.
It's true.
It's just, are you willing to have skin in the game and play the long game to see where it's going to take you? And a lot of people don't.
So that's interesting. So in terms of a point of differentiation, right? I just want to make sure I play it back as I heard it, is that there's most, if I heard you correctly, like most placements, placement recruitment services are demand driven, meaning that they, and I think this is a little bit of what I've noticed as well. Is a demand driven meaning they've got a role and they're seeking people to fit that role. But what I heard from you is that you have a supply side approach where you recognize there's demand is going to be fluid, but
Right,
it's anchoring in that supply and locking in the people who are going to fill these roles and promoting those people, this Leaders on Deck program, in a way that makes them, much more powerful, more unique, et cetera. And that way you can, and that's going to be how you compete. You're going to
right,
compete on supply,
right, right.
right?
I really changed the narrative and said, if I go all in and I invest in, and I'm very highly selective with who I put on the calendar, who I'm really going to be intentional about,
Mhm.
and the way that we're showing up. But yes, build in those relationships, because those relationships, having on the supply side, the demand, like you said, it's always going to be fluid. But
Mhm.
how do we kind of look at it at a completely different lens in a market? And then how do I leverage that over a period of time? Because guess what? Those leaders are eventually going to continue to evolve, get promoted, or they're going to leave toxic, organizations. And guess who they're calling? Me. But once they get to where they're going, that's where they call me to build their teams. And
Mhm.
that's really what we've done here at Cory, is really invest in the people. Like, people talk about, people are your biggest
Mhm.
asset. But why would that matter if, like, you're only looking at single requisitions coming forward to you, and you're only looking at it from the lens of a one-to-one? We're
Mhm.
looking at it from a completely different lens of, I'm going to invest in 100 leaders right through that year, and out of those 100 leaders, there's probably going to be a third of a third of a third. A third
Mhm.
are going to probably continue to support you in some capacity. A third probably, you'll have still a great relationship but may not bear fruit. And then a third will become decision makers wherever they go, and they call us to build their
And they
team.
call you back. Sure. Yeah, that's the virtuous circle. Now, do you find, like, given that you're supply side oriented, um, that are there times when you look at a buyer and you're making a recommendation to them before they've even articulated a need?
Yes, there are times. Yes, there are
Okay,
times.
hey, I see you're growing, firm 1, 2, 3, and I have this great regional who can. Do you have any gap? Like, as part of your conversations and gap analysis.
Yeah, I would say, a lot of that is kind of, I would say that's actually kind of old school recruiting is,
Oh, is
hey,
it?
I'm going to just pitch you somebody because I have this great person. We actually don't do that very often.
Okay.
And here's why. I don't believe it bears that much fruit because you really have to, if you really want to earn the respect of executive leadership teams within organizations, you have to understand their company culture, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and their pain
Hmm.
points. And if you just come to the table with someone who you think might be great, right? But there's a mismatch. It's I look at it almost like dating, right?
Hmm.
Just because someone's on the market and they're ready to date, and then you're like, yeah, but my friend Johnny down the street is also,
Yeah.
available, doesn't necessarily mean, unless you know Johnny, right, and you know this person, that there really is going to be that value. You're taking a very large risk. If
Hmm.
you don't know that person down the street and just say, hey, my friend is ready to date, I don't know who you are. I haven't invested in that time.
Right.
You could actually be compromising your new relationship with that buyer because, right, you haven't put the groundwork to start establishing true trust and rapport. So I don't personally do that. There's a lot of organizations that do that. And I just haven't found that that has been very successful
Hmm.
within our tenure here. But really, what we do is really look at the lens of, hey, when our buyers come to us, our clients come to us, because at the end of the day, our clients are our number, they are the people that are paying, right? They are
Hmm.
our main clientele. Candidates are always going to be fluid in some capacity, right? Doesn't mean we don't still prioritize those relationships, and that's really the difference, is that we don't look at it as just a transaction, but it's really like understanding from the client's point of view, in really understanding, hey, when you say you're looking for, I need to hire a vice president of operations. We want to understand, from what's going on in the organization is, why is this role open? How long has this person been in there? What are some of the pain points you guys are going through? What is the
Well,
good, the bad, and
interesting.
the ugly?
So this is kind of the concept, and I heard this from a guy called Dan Sullivan, that you are a buyer too.
Mm,
Like you kind of that because those are qualifying criteria from a buyer's
mhm.
perspective, right? So you're not only
Right.
seeking
Yes,
to
yes,
receive the requirements, you're seeking to vet the requirements as a select. You're
yes.
selecting as well.
Yes, yes. I would say actually
Interesting.
one of our core values here, or one of our things that makes us different, is we're highly selective. So if there's an organization that approaches us and says, hey, Kelsi, we're looking to hire a vice president, we actually are vetting them because we're highly selective of who we're going to take on, because it's our brand, our reputation, and who we're going out into the market.
Hmm.
And if there's not alignment there, which there have been times I've turned away clients, potential clients, because if I don't believe there's coachability, transparency, and also this, and I don't believe people need to come forward and say they have a clear understanding what they're looking to hire. That's why we're the experts. We're here
Hmm.
to build your team with you. We have a lot of the data, the intel, what the market rate is, what type of leader you could get. So it's not so much of you have to have all the answers and come to the table and be ready to write a check, right, for this person, but you do have to have a hunger and drive and not be window shoppers. If I
Right.
think you're a window shopper, we're not interested in partnering with you. We'll
Or
refer
worse,
you to a
or they're
different.
trying to price match. They're shopping
Yes.
around. Yeah.
Yes, and they that does happen a lot in the industry. So then,
Yeah.
anybody will take on that search. They'll work on it for 6+ months to a year. They hang on to it. I'm all about leveling conversations, being very straight shooter with them, and saying, hey, if this is something that is a mutual agreement,
Hmm.
and I believe in having skin in the game. So we do a hybrid of a retained model. So
Hmm.
I have seen significant value in terms of the higher ROI of placing somebody, is if that client, that organization has some skin in the game. And a lot of people who typically decide to go that direction with us, it it works out so much more smoother because they have the same type of mentality as we do, as, well, this is top priority, this is top priority. There's a
Yeah.
mutual respect that's already standing in the foundation, because I've always built Cory with, we're not a yes ma'am, yes sir firm.
Hmm.
Most of them are, a lot of them are. It's very much, we do what the client says, We don't level with them. If they want X and we know that doesn't exist out there, we're just gonna keep working our butts off to get this
Yeah.
filled. And guess what? Eventually they think you're the problem. And the reality is you are the problem because you're not leveling as a partner. You're
Mhm.
leveling at a completely subservient mentality, and then the respect's out the door. So
And
I'm
you
very
and
much,
you and now you're competing on price.
yeah, exactly. And
Right.
I really believe in, over the years, you have to continue to level up and be even more selective on both sides of the market.
Yep. So then it kind of leads to the question: why is executive recruiting even a business?
Yes. So it's interesting. The more higher level you get, the more stealth mode it is. It really just comes
Right.
down to, there are, a lot of the executives we work with, right? They're in the 3 to 500 plus
Mhm.
range of what they are looking for. So when they are saying, hey, I've got to make a strategic move, going into the market is not really an option on their own. It can happen. It does happen. But they would rather partner with an organization like us or whoever it might be, right?
Mhm.
Because at that point, you don't want to just up and leave. Oftentimes, you have a lot of skin in the game with whatever organization you
Sure.
are. It's a lot of visibility. And there's usually a change in leadership, toxicity. Something is going on in the organization where they're making an exit,
Mhm.
but they typically want to be brokered into new conversations, right? And they want to be building rapport and relationships with us because, like I was saying earlier, it's this industry is very social circle and overlapped.
Mhm.
It's crazy how I'll hear from president of this company, and then 2 weeks later I hear somebody that knows that person. Now I know all the dirt that's going on.
Sure.
It's very interesting,
You
and
get you're
how
like a
there's
counselor, you get like a
trust.
therapist.
Yeah, I know, really, like, I can't, like, pit it because I'm not licensed therapist, but I am a therapist at the end of the day. Probably why I love my job. I do business therapy. And so they call me to confide
Funny.
and say, I've got some high stakes on the line right now. I don't know. Some people are in the position where they're like, I know what I need to do. This is my next game plan. How do we like work together? Then there's
Mhm.
other folks that are in the thick of it. I need to confide in you and your team to figure out, okay, how do I level up? I always say, from playing checkers to chess, and
Mhm.
you really want to set up yourself for success. And honestly, like I said, the higher level you go up, the more people you can't trust. I mean, we have executives that say, Kelsi, I can't even be seen at a Starbucks, so, like, chatting with you. Half the time we don't go to these big events. Honestly, half the time is because everything we do is very confidential.
Naturally,
Both
right?
sides of the market. It's like a speakeasy. Everybody wants to talk to you, but
Yeah.
nobody can be seen with you because
Yeah.
there's always assumptions on the table on both sides. And so it's very interesting. The higher level you get, the more people will share, like you said, a therapist, some really personal and really business related, of course, but these are people's lives at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Outside of our kids or our families. Um, they want to go to somebody that they can trust, and they can vent, they can start coming up with the game plan, again, from organizations calling me and saying, hey, Kelsi, we've got to make some changes in here, nobody knows about it, this is what we're going to have to do, how do we start partnering together to start underground looking for our next hire. And then the
Mhm.
other side of the market, right, where it's candidates that are like, I'm still here, no one knows I'm looking, but I've got to make an exit. There's some unethical things happening, and I can't stay with this organization. We're just no longer aligned. There's a culture
Mhm.
shift. So it's interesting. The higher you get up, executive search will, I hope, right? I hope it's always going to be there to some capacity, because you really are building a very trusted, deep industry network, and you have to earn that. You can't just like walk into this space and say, hey, I do this. No one will trust you at that
Yeah.
point. You have to put years in, and through those social channels, people will start coming to you and say, hey, I don't know all the circumstances, but I know such and such called you. I'm in a different, can we have a conversation? And then before you know it, I always say 5 years from now, I hope you and I are still talking. Like that's the way I
Yeah.
look at it, is that one conversation leads to, you actually get to build amazing relationships on both sides of the marketplace.
So when you find yourself in a situation that you're kind of approaching the market, first call, first, second call, third call, how, like, you spoke a little about this earlier around your filtering. How do you filter for those hell yes buyers on the demand side?
Yes, I would say a lot of it, the language that they use is really
Mhm.
important. The turnaround time of their engagement with us is also important. If
Mhm.
someone is saying, you know, we're not sure what we're looking for, we don't want to rush into this, we want to look at, this is a really critical role for us, we want to take our time, it actually is usually more of a yellow flag. We have to kind of unpeel. Okay, well,
Mhm.
yes, of course everybody doesn't want to rush to make this hire, but once you go to market, you can't have a job, and if you want the best talent in the market, we're able to hunt those folks down and find them and poach
Yeah.
them. But we can't be doing that for 6+ months. We have to have some within reason, right? Because it's just like saying you want to go on a date with somebody, but then you don't ask them on the third, fourth, fifth date until
Right.
6 months later. So I really do look at it as like, you know, from that standpoint, is the language that they're using. Are they coachable? Are they saying, hey, we're humble enough to know that this is what we would like to see. We don't know if that's what's going to be the best fit. We're really relying on you to show us. And I always say, if we do take on a client, we're looking at, I want to show you A, B, C candidate. This is the
Mhm.
price range, kind of like in the housing industry. I always
Mhm.
use dating and housing analogies because they're really, honestly, there's so much commonality with that. But just like, let's say you come into the market and say, I have a salary of $200,000. This is what I'm looking for. And this is usually in the discovery phase conversations.
Mhm.
And we typically will work with a client or say, yes, they're a hell yes client when they say, yes, I want to look at, okay, we're going to provide option A, B, and C. They're all different price ranges, different skill sets, different brands they work for. Now we got to hone in through our coaching together and find that collaborative voice, who is actually the ideal player for your team. And if
Mhm.
we can't get through that phase, it probably, we have to look at when we take on a new client, because we are highly selective and we're a boutique firm, like, time is money. So if someone is like, I pretty much window shopping, saying, I want to look at everybody, I'm not sure, we haven't had luck in the past, things of that nature,
Yeah,
it means at least
they've tried other things, right? And
they
they
tried it.
failed at those other things.
Yes. And there's not a lot of accountability through that conversation, right? It's
Mhm.
always kind of somebody else, or, this didn't work because of X, or we have this wish list. A lot of people will come forward with a wish list, just like, right, you want to buy a house, you have a wish list, but then your budget is not the demand. You want the wish list of the $1.5 million home, but your budget is around
Yeah, yeah,
500.
yeah.
That's
It's like
where we have to level with them and
like
say,
home
okay,
hunters, or
yes.
whatever it is.
And
Right?
that happens so often. And at most executive search firms or staffing firms, they're not asking these hard questions. They're
Yeah,
just thrilled they got an opportunity, and then they're just going to go to market, and then the job never gets filled, and then they're frustrated. It's
yeah,
like, yes, because you should be frustrated. And they're frustrated because you didn't level with them from the very beginning. And
right.
if you don't have that leveling from the very beginning, it's very difficult to have that authoritative conversation in the middle towards the end.
Yeah,
So that's really where we look at is, is your comp in alignment? If it's not in alignment, we will tell you. We will
yeah,
come back. So there are times where you decide, let's move forward with this partnership. Let's see where it takes us. But just because we move forward does not mean that we're locked in the whole time.
yeah.
But that's where we have to say, hey, we went to market, you had this comp, you have this wish list. Let's start looking at the non-negotiables, and then what are the compromises, because compromise always has to be on the table.
Do you like the word compromise or trade off?
You could do trade-off or compromise,
I
I
think
guess you could
compromise
do.
sounds like you're giving something up that you want versus, it's like consensus, compromise, or trade off. Like they're just like there's a little bit more. acknowledgement that if I'm compromising, like just the nature of the word, I'm giving something up reluctantly. But if I'm trading off, I'm making a decision to choose red
Yeah.
versus blue. And this came up actually yesterday in one of these shows, just like the word trade off, and that everything is in sales is a trade off.
Right.
And
Yes.
so, and so trying to figure out because part of we find in the discovery conversation is you want to trade off the things that you don't care about on that wish list
Right.
for the things that you care about. And so I don't know. I just want to kind of play with that language for a bit because I think it's emerging as being important in terms of getting to hell yes, because
Yes.
it's part of that discovery. And I had this conversation with Mike Wolber a few months ago
Mm-hmm.
around like he used the word discernment in that
Mm-hmm.
discovery piece, and that discernment is around figuring what their forced ranking of priorities are, because everybody wants better, faster, cheaper, but that's not representative of what you can go to market with.
Right. Right. And also I think, the trade-off is definitely great verbiage to use, because at the end of the day, the way you communicate and how people interpret is everything. And,
Yeah.
especially on whoever it is that you're building that rapport with. And I also think, back to your point of, you know, something that's interesting as well that many search firms or staffing agencies probably wouldn't say is, it's not always even about the cheaper. There's companies out there that would be overpaying and
Mm-hmm.
they don't know that. And
Mm-hmm.
so really, but no one's telling them. So it's like, okay, you're actually overpaying for this. And reality is, you want to be working with a partner because that is going to be a straight shooter. That's the best thing I can say. So straight shooter is going to tell you what's going on the market, what you can, what you have to kind of look at reevaluating who's
Mm-hmm.
going to be sitting in that seat. But there's so many nuances when picking the right firm, and vice versa, us picking the right organization, and what's going to be the most lucrative outcome, for all parties involved, for
Yeah.
everybody involved. Because at the end of the day, right, we don't want to be just taking on a bunch of opportunities and nothing's getting accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody does want to have some type of insight. And I think a lot of it comes down to the higher level you get up, it's very culture driven, for both sides of the
Of
market.
course.
So they don't really care about, hey, I want to just look at somebody who has 15 plus years of experience at this title. Really, they want to understand what brands did they work for? How do you assess company culture? What do you look at whenever you are looking at the personality hires? And then how do you get somebody to sign the dotted line? Because I think a lot of people think, oh, I love recruiting, I love matchmaking. It's like, but do you really? Because at the end of the
Yeah.
day, when you do it for free as networking, it's so different when you have dollars attached to it, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot more on the line. So you have to really understand
No,
people.
it's accountability, right?
Yes, you
And
have
I
to
think that, like
understand
what
that.
I've always admired um, in the recruiting game is that, and I had this conversation. I can't remember what it was, maybe before Christmas, and it was around like people are very bad at articulating their job their job requirements, or
Hmm.
generally speaking. I'm terrible. I might be the worst.
Yeah,
And so like I'm very, because I want you to be just like me, but that's not practical. And but don't, I want you to be just like me, but 100% not like me.
yeah,
Right. I can't hire two of us because nothing will happen. And so like, we need to we're very bad at articulating the requirements. They're very fungible. They're very mushy. And so, and then I'm going to give you this mushy box of things that
hmm,
may or may not be I may be holding back on the requirements because I don't want to disclose things that I'm not that
hmm.
I'm upset about. And so like, and then you got to go and find that perfect fit and then be consultative in terms of who I'm selecting based on, let's call it 50% accurate requirements. And that only
Sure.
comes from being successful at that only comes from having to staff those similar roles over and over again. Because otherwise, to your comment earlier about niching down, otherwise everything looks like how it's written on paper. But
Right.
I would be shocked if what you supply with and then what's written on paper, I mean, that match can't be more than 75%. I would say I say I want this, but it's almost like a good waiter, right? A good
Yeah.
server in a restaurant. Like, hey, I really like the burger tonight. Well, have you tried the fish? It's like,
Sure.
it's really outstanding. And if you're looking for something light, you kind of got to dig in a bit around what they're looking for, because the job description is
Yes.
misrepresentation of the reality.
Yes, no, I think you bring up a really great point, and I think that's where the job order takers and the people
Mhm.
that do this as true headhunters are very different in this game. Is that you have to be able to work with a brand new client, build over a period of time pretty quickly rapport and trust, and you have to be an expert enough to understand. Here's what I'm hearing you say. I always like to reiterate what I heard, and I reiterate it though in my terminology of okay, because I don't expect you, and I always say on both sides of the market, I don't expect you to be an expert at job searching and looking for your next opportunity. Just like when you're building your teams, right? You're an expert in different capacities, but when it
Mhm.
comes to this, you can't know everything, right? I
Mhm.
mean, you just know, okay, we have a need, we have a demand. Here's what worked, here's what didn't work, and this is where I think we need to go. And when I
Mhm.
hear that and I understand, okay, this is it's really starting from the very beginning of the culture, because we
Mhm.
can backtrack and put every great person in front of you, but if they are not the right personality hire for that portfolio, right? Because every portfolio, if we're looking at a regional, a vice president, a director, a C suite, it's really going to be based on what market are they in, who's the existing team there, what
Mhm.
investors or owners are serving in that particular portfolio, what are some of the issues. A lot of them is we don't have accountability, right? We need a leader in here that's going to hold people accountable and still develop the people at the same time. So you're looking for a very specific personality type with years of experience, and then you also need to find that person that's going to be complementary to that particular that particular market. Otherwise, what's going to happen if you don't know what you don't know and you're just putting in, well, this person has this years of experience, they fit our income, or the budget that we have for this role, they seem good, we don't know, I mean, they seem like they got through the interview process, you put them in there, you could be compromising quite a few people under you if you have, not the right leader in that
So
seat.
that's like the whole like functional requirements versus non-functional requirements. Like,
Yes.
functional sounds like table stakes, they meet the Excel filter, but
Right.
really the non-functional pieces is what I heard this, what makes it successful. I heard this a long time ago, um, years ago. Um, Companies hire on skill and fire on character or on culture. Hire on
Yeah.
skill and fire on culture. Put it that way, which kind of aligns with what you were sharing on, like, because it's exceptionally difficult, and in some cases almost illegal or feels illegal to hire on culture.
Yeah, I think we've kind of made culture into a dirty word, but
Yeah.
culture is not. It's really not. It's like, think of it like this, going back to the dating analogy, especially the higher level you go. If you're in the C suite, you are looking for a marriage, right? That's really critical. Then you are looking for your next CEO, COO. You have to find your yin and your yang. You're not looking just for anybody to fill that seat. It is the most important role within that organization. And so a lot of executives will resonate when I say that hey, this is the most important opportunity, what brand I stand behind, the reputation, and me putting myself inserting inside, what the expectations are. And I would say culture is very much like the dating industry. There's a lot of people inside the industry, right, that you could go on dates with, but you're looking for your soulmate typically when you start inside that
Mhm.
process. And that is culture. It's finding the personality. It's finding, yeah, this person was great on paper. I could probably get along with them, but is this somebody I want to build my life with?
Well, I think,
That's where the
and I
question.
would go as far as like, I mean, marriage is a funny, I mean, it's an appropriate analog, but it's like, I find that marriage and business partners are like, they're two different things. Like, for sometimes I even think it's, I'm still married, luckily, but like, I think it's almost harder. It's easier to get out of a marriage than get out of a business partnership.
Yeah, it can.
It's like,
It
because like
can.
damage, the collateral damage that can occur in the wrong hire at the top level
Yes.
is absolutely the people's lives that it affects is compounding. And so it's almost like you're looking for a battle partner, right? Like, who can you trust, not just so much in a war zone, because that's
Right.
where that's what's going to reveal the the fractures in the character, the personality, the culture, versus kind of the show up and be charming.
Yeah, and I think, there's different things you can look at that lens, but it's more of the commitment, the locked in, the
Mm,
trust,
get it.
the saying I'm all in with you, you're all in with me. We're going to build something together. We're going to
Yeah.
have really hard days, we're going to have great days, but like we're all in. And that's really difficult the higher level you get, because in marriage, I'm really saying more about it's the culture. It's we use this as, I was talking to another executive yesterday. He's worked for some really reputable large brands like CBRE, Greystar.
Yeah.
Here's the thing though. So I said, okay, when you start reaching out and looking for new opportunities that are more entrepreneurial driven, they're the small to mid-sized organizations. Yes, they want to scale and grow. Here's where culture matters. Where you work and what brands you've worked for, whether you agree or don't agree with this, is that is part of culture, because a larger organizations typically, right, again, assumptions are always on the table, is
Mhm.
that they're siloed. So oftentimes a very entrepreneurial firm and more of an institutional firm typically are not going to recruit, they're not going to cross over very often.
Yep. I would
And when
agree.
they do, they typically will leave within the first 6 months to a year. And here's why: their culture is so built differently, where it's entrepreneurial, can be very, you have to wear many hats, you have to roll up your sleeves, you have to have that grit, you kind of have to love the chaos. That is very much entrepreneurial. That is, even if it's evolving and scaling.
Hmm.
Institutional is very more buttoned up. It's a
Hmm.
lot more clear direction. Everybody kind of has their set of responsibilities, and then it's more siloed. And so typically, like when we're looking at the culture, that's what I mean, is that culture doesn't have to be such a bad word. I think we've kind of created into something that it is, but without that, that is the backbone of many industries. So if you kind of get that footing off wrong, and people don't know what they don't know,
Yep.
um, they're looking for their next opportunity. They're like, this will be a great job for me. I want to take this opportunity. They get in, they're like, I can't, like, this is not the right fit for me.
Yeah. This
And I
this is
thought
funny.
it looked great. They sold me on all these things, but I realized I really excel in more of this capacity.
Yeah.
That's where culture at the intersection is critical. That's just one of many areas that you can
But
identify
I think it's
culture.
interesting to kind of like to begin framing the conversation, bring it together. Is like when you talk about um, getting a yes customer, right? So the reason why the business exists, your business, all recruiting businesses, is because there is a confidentiality and a stealth mode to it.
Right.
One, two, there is a culture fit that is exceptionally
Mhm.
difficult to put on a CV and on paper. That
Right.
only comes from an experienced conversation around and just knowledge around that culture, just to make
Sure.
sure the culture fits. Because especially at the exec level, we've got to make sure that that culture mesh exists. And
Yes.
we're bad at articulating even what you just described, like being convicted around entrepreneurial organizations are different than corporate organizations, and you may and an organization can change, but those fits
Right.
have to coexist. Otherwise, we're going to have it's not going to be a good fit. So why does it? And then from an urgency perspective, urgency typically pre-exists, but you test for urgency. You select the right clients because you got to put in effort before you get paid. So
Right.
it's kind of like, I want to make sure kind of like, so we kind of like close those out because it's been a great conversation and just make sure we're kind of landing on the hell yes kind of parameters around the problem you solve, why it exists. People are strategic, most important part of the business, hardest to hire, hardest to mobilize,
Mhm.
hardest to get rid of when it's a bad decision. Um, the urgency is tested. The why it is a problem is because the stealth mode, people are out there. So getting into in solutions they've tried other providers, they've tried different types of providers, they try to do it themselves,
Sure.
and those are why they end up with their hands. Maybe they try to hire internally, but that's not going to fit where they want to go strategically. So like all those things all lend towards someone who's really in a situation where they're prepared to make a hell yes decision.
Yes.
And so now not all deals are won, and you get
Right.
objections, and despite all the things you're competing on successfully on, you get objections sometimes.
Yes.
How do those land? What kind of objections do you get?
Yes, I mean the objections, I think over the years they start shifting and changing just the more that you get inside your craft and really can articulate. But I
Hmm.
would say some of the objections that can come up, yeah, price maybe, but that would say that actually kind of that price really not so much. Staffing, yes, price is always something, but executive
Hmm.
search, they know they're going to pay.
Yeah.
They already know what they're kind of walking into, right?
Yeah. They may not
So
like it.
yeah, they may not like it, but they know it's not going to be cheap. So they kind of already have that mental buy-in.
Yeah.
Really, they are actually assessing you at the same time for culture fit.
Right.
Can I work with you? Can I trust you? What do you have that's different than, such and such down the street that I've known or have heard of for years?
Hmm.
And that's, I think the objection would be, is it the right culture fit for both parties, right?
Hmm.
Do they have a different methodology and we have a different methodology? There's no right or wrong. It's just that's the awesome thing about having options on the table that you can
Hmm.
consider it. The other thing too is, just looking at, a lot of things that come up with the objections is things happen internally before you know it. So they will say, you know what, now that we're kind of looking at it, how long this might take to fill this seat, whatever that might be, right? There's always assumptions on the table of what that's going to look like. And then before you know it, they just decide, I'm just going to promote this internal hire. I don't want to have to go to market. It's too much of a burden,
Yeah.
right? Whether that's what they're truly articulating or not. And guess what? Typically, they will call back 6 months later and say the person that we decided that we just promoted into this role couldn't take us to where we needed to go.
Yeah.
And that's where the challenges come up, is that they have to kind of learn through that
Well,
process.
they caved when it got difficult.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
so it's really comes down to a timing, who else is in the decision making seats, who's sitting in that room with you.
Hmm.
I would say again, comp or the money isn't as important to them at that point. Some of them, yes, I would say, but it doesn't happen that much. It's really, who do they get along with and who do they trust, and how do you show up, on those
Hmm.
conversations. And if you are there just to truly sell, again, if you're working with high level executives, they see through that, right?
Hmm.
I mean, you kind of are expert at relationship building. Hopefully, you are an expert at relationship building, because if you can learn and understand people, understand their pain points, and understand what you can deliver, and then you have actual transparent like data or information or how you go about it, that's what they want to buy into. They don't want
Hmm.
to be sold to. So the minute you
No.
go into selling, I'd like to think that that's a huge objection, right? Because it's like, they don't, the right type of buyer doesn't want to be sold to, so they're going to find whoever's going to be the right match for them, because at the end of the day, you're representing their brand.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. When you take a look at kind of like maybe a younger you or someone who's joining your company, or maybe even a peer looking for mentorship, and you want to give them just a little bit of advice if they're struggling, or they just want to, maybe even right now, there's so many people that are seeking a change.
You're
Like,
right.
what's the piece of advice you consistently give and stand by based on your experience?
Yes, I would
I'm trying to
say
find out. Yes.
yes. I would say, look at I really live by the 4 C's. I created the 4 C's and how you assess if you're a job seeker, or even if you are on the employer side, and breaking it down into assessing every 6 months to a year of
Hmm.
where you're at. And so the 4 C's is going to be based on commute, compensation, culture, and challenges. So
Okay.
when you kind of look at these 4 C's, challenges meaning, am I being challenged? Am I being actually like learning something new in my
Mhm.
role? Or could I do this with my eyes closed? I'm bored out of my mind. I'm ready for a change. Commute, fortunately for a lot of people, that's kind of gone away for some folks. And for some folks, they're still driving, X amount of time that's taking them away from their families.
Yeah.
And then compensation and culture. I would say if you have 2 out of the 4 that are being compromised in that time, it's time for you to start looking, or it's time to at least start getting
Interesting.
mentally prepared that
Yeah.
there needs to be a change. If you only have 1 out of the 4, the only one that could be the exception is culture. If that is like compromising ethical values or something like that, But if you only have one out of the four and you're like, I don't know, I got approached by this recruiter, I hearing about this opportunity, I'm not sure if I should make a change. Sometimes you don't need to make the change. If you are really happy overall where you are, that doesn't mean the grass is always greener. You have to be very strategic the more higher level you go. Earlier and middle of career, I'm a big believer, diversify your experience. The higher level you get, you start niching down in your craft. That's critical. You'll see that time and time again. Like, they hire you for expertise, but in the beginning, you don't want to only be pigeonholing yourself working for one organization, one expertise, one culture, because guess what? When the economy doesn't end up going the direction you want, you've really hurt yourself from opportunities that you could have really identified. This is actually really where I excel at. And then I would say if you have three or more of them being compromised, at that point, it's affecting your mental health. It's probably affecting other areas of your life. And you probably will find yourself either transitioning out before another job. So it's really important you always assess those things. So that's great advice I give to anybody, and at all walks of life, all stages of your career. That's how you can quickly identify, instead of like wondering or when should I make a change? Am I making this a big deal? That's the best thing, to start looking at that lens and say, okay, this makes sense or this doesn't make sense in this time.
That is so valuable. I'm going to soak on that for a bit. I like that. Commute comp culture challenges. That's worth soaking on. I like that. And even like thinking back on my historical career, when did I have, 1 out of 4 wasn't working, 2 out of 4 wasn't working?
Right.
That's very valuable.
It really is helpful too, is like, if you are headhunting somebody, and here's how we can assess if we have a candidate in the market, we really like the candidate, our client really likes the candidate. If we can't discover out of those 4, what are your pain points? What is the likelihood you making it to an accepted offer? If we have not done our job and assessed where's your pain, guess what? You could have somebody who's a really great interviewer and they love getting offers and they never accept an offer. And then guess what? You've really tainted that whole experience. And that usually, I don't say it only falls on one party, but it really comes down to, if you can assess that pain point with that candidate, saying, hey, people can get scared towards the end. Oh, I'm so scared of change. I've been with my company for 10 plus years, right? I don't know. You have to say, hey, when we were in the very beginning of this call, we assessed what your pain points are. You shared this, this, and this.
Yep.
When we look at that, sometimes you have to encourage them and say, it does make sense for you to make a change. You're just feeling afraid. Or you know what? Actually, if I were you, I would stay. And you should know that, though, way before you get to this final stage. And that's the beauty of working with a third party. Or you train your in-house team to know how to assess, because otherwise the candidate also might not be serious buyers. And you have to have buyers on both sides in the marketplace.
That is interesting. Yeah. That I get that. And then even in the process, like as you come to close, you want to revisit those 4 C's, because maybe their weighting of one versus the other is changed, or they are inflamed about something that was like just temporary.
Right.
And then that created a reaction, but maybe not action.
Right. And it's it's easily missed if you're not trained, or if you're not looking at it from that kind of lens. But I promise you'll be making much better hires if you really start that in the beginning of that vetting process, and then you hold it accountable through the entire process.
Yep.
And that makes a big difference in terms of the experience on both sides.
Wow. Love it. Who should we talk to next?
Oh gosh, who should I?
With your network, that's a loaded question.
Yes. Okay, so let me think. There's so many great people to talk to inside the market. Does it matter, like, in terms of, oh, you know who you should talk to, which you probably already have. I don't know. Okay. I think you should talk to Gregory Frank. He's like, he's one of our partners here at Cory.
Good idea. You know what? That's a great plan.
He's awesome.
I text with him every single day.
Yeah. No, Gregory, he is such I mean, he is really making a huge difference inside the SFR
Yes.
BTR sector, and he's really passionate about a lot of different things, and that's why we've collaborated together. But I love his story. I love how he never even really was started in this industry, fell in love with it, and now he's trying to build the world's largest media platform for SFR
Yeah.
BTR. And I think he's got some great perspective, so I highly recommend
What I
Gregory.
love, I think that's a great idea, and that's easy to execute. Like what I love about working with Greg is his belief in everyone's goodness is unmeasurable.
Yes,
His conviction around everyone doing things with good intention is like it's captivating. I
yes, he's
love
got a
it
contagious personality.
completely, and he's unsinkable. Right?
Yes,
He just like believes that you are showing up this meeting with 100% conviction that we are both in this to do good for each other, and it's contagious. It's
yes.
awesome. It's awesome. That's a great. God, sometimes right underneath your nose. That's a great awesome one. All right, cool. And how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, I would say follow me, Kelsi Cory, for different content on both sides of the marketplace, specifically real estate, all verticals of real estate. Follow us at Cory Executive Recruiting, Leaders on Deck, our newest venture. We'd love to have you join our community, and just thank you so much for even creating this space. I'm so glad that we actually got to like dive into some
Oh,
fun
geez.
conversations, and I hope it was useful or valuable. I had a lot of fun.
Oh, this is so interesting. I mean, the four C's. That's going to be packed away for a bit. That's got to ruminate for a
I
while.
love it.
All right. Thank you so much, Kelsi. Everyone listening today, if you're listening on the live show later on, add some comments. If you have any questions, we'll get notified and be able to answer any questions you might have. If you're listening on the podcast, hit subscribe and like. Obviously, that makes it easier for anyone to find us
Yes.
and find this story that we're sharing here. And any comments you might have, those will also all kind of bubble up to both of us. Follow us on LinkedIn. You'll get invited to future shows. That way they kind of show up in your feed. And then, as always, it's brought to you by IRCX. We're AI remote maintenance software for property management, solving you triage, turns, and trips, and making life easier for all your people and all your residents. And this was an awesome show. This is a real cup filling. Thank you so much, Kelsi. And
Yeah.
thank you for powering through today. I know that it can be tough sometimes, but you're kicking ass. And
Thank
if anyone's
you.
curious about that, you can go into Kelsi's feed and dig in as to why I'm being so appreciative for your grit.
We
And
made it happen.
we made it
Like
happen.
we're still standing. I love
We're,
it.
we're still standing. And congratulations. And I think for everyone also, and I'll give you, we didn't talk about it at all, but I want to make sure I do not lose the opportunity to congratulate you for inspiring female entrepreneurs that embrace motherhood, that embrace all of those things, because it is not easy being a mom. It is not easy being an entrepreneur. It's not easy being a spouse, and especially in the people business. And the if I can't take this opportunity to celebrate you, I don't know who might not or might, but I want to make sure that I celebrate the
Thank you.
inspiration that you do for my daughter and other daughters that are out there, because it's so, you give permission to be successful.
Yes. Yes. Go for it. Don't be afraid. I think whenever I started this journey, at some point I knew if I did want to become a mom, that you have to kind of figure out, where does motherhood fit into scaling a business, being an entrepreneur, and your business is your baby. So then how do you create more space
Yep.
for kids? And it's like, it's possible. It's overwhelming, but it's very possible. And sometimes it's good to stop the scaling and just put a pause, so you can put that investing into your family.
Mm-hmm.
And that, don't limit yourself. You just have to create your own path. So thank you for acknowledging that, and I really appreciate it. And I really just commend you and everything that you're doing. And this was such a great conversation. I'm just so glad to be a part of the Hell Yes Show.
Oh, that's so awesome. Well, I can't wait to hopefully see you in the next show, or at least catch up with you
Yeah.
next time we're in the same town together. And you're a cup filler. It's awesome talking to you. And I look forward to chatting soon. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for listening. Thank you so much, Kelsi. We'll chat soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.